Hello, welcome to the Real Bit Wars. I'm Chris, and on today's episode of Worst to First, we're going to rank the King Kong series. In 1933, King Kong took the world by storm with its innovative techniques and stunning visuals. To this day, the original film is awe-inspiring and influential to filmmakers across the world. It is easily one of the greatest feats in cinematic history and is one of the greatest films ever made. So with that being said, the original is obviously the best. So today we're only going to be ranking the sequels as well as the remakes. Coming in at number 7 is the 1986 film King Kong Lives. This serves as a direct sequel to a film that you'll see later on our list. This one was panned by critics, and honestly it can be a little bit boring and the acting is rather flat. Konami even ported an adaptation of this film to the Nintendo Famicom. To be honest, you'd probably be better off just playing that. Who are we kidding? You'd probably even be better off playing the Atari 2600 game. Overall, this is a mediocre film with a few memorable moments. The visuals are a mixed bag. Some of the close-ups look great, and others not so much. There's plenty of blood and gore in this version. Kong just gets absolutely obliterated with gunfire at the end of the film. Now this is widely considered to be the worst of the King Kong films, and it's easy to see why, but to be completely honest with you, I kind of enjoy it myself. So I'd recommend giving it at least one watch. So coming in at number 6, from 1967, we have King Kong Escapes from Toho. And once again, this serves as a direct sequel to a film you'll see later in the list. A villain by the name of Doctor Who, no, not that Doctor Who, creates King Kong's robotic counterpart, Mechanic Kong, in order to dig for Element X, a radioactive material found at the North Pole. When Mechanic Kong malfunctions, Doctor Who seeks out the real Kong to finish the job, using a hypnotic device to control him. This film is loosely based on the Rankin Bass animated series The King Kong Show. Now this film is definitely cheesy and it's difficult to take it seriously, but overall it's just good old-fashioned campy fun. So coming in at number 5, we have Kong Skull Island from 2017. Stars Samuel L. Jackson, and he even recycles his Hold On to Your Butts line from Jurassic Park.
Remember, hold on to your butts.
This film was done by Legendary Pictures, and many of the creatures depicted have that very typical look of their films. They basically just look like giant arachnid creatures with long limbs. There's a great opening sequence with both an American and a Japanese pilot crashing on an island, only to be interrupted by Kong. When we flash forward, we see one of the pilots has survived on the island, played by John C. Reilly, who I must admit is a little bit miscast and kind of distracting at times. But he also does deliver a very nice and heartwarming sequence during the end credits. The long-distance silhouette shots of Kong that you might have seen in the ad campaigns look fantastic. This film has a really good style to it that was developed very early on with the concept art. Now, although I do really enjoy this film, it does seem to serve only as a setup for the upcoming crossover with Godzilla. Speaking of which, coming in at number 4 is King Kong vs. Godzilla from 1962. It does serve as a third film in the original Godzilla series. Although it is also the third film to feature King Kong, it is not an official installment in that series. This is the first time either character appeared in color or widescreen. The miniatures and effects are very unconvincing, and the scale of the monsters were changed in order to make them of similar height and size. So although this film is extremely schlocky and should not be taken seriously, I do highly recommend it because it is a lot of fun. So coming in at number 3, we have Son of Kong. After the success of the original King Kong in 1933, Son of Kong was rushed into production and was actually released a mere 9 months after its predecessor. As a result, the stop motion is a little choppy, and the runtime is a dismal 69 minutes. The plot takes a long time to get moving, and it pales in comparison to the original, but it's still wildly entertaining in its own right. Some might call it short but sweet. This one is a little polarizing. A lot of people don't like it because of its flaws, but it's hard to deny that it still has that real classic stop motion look, even though it wasn't executed nearly as well as the original. So coming in at number 2, we have from 2005, directed by Peter Jackson, King Kong. It's set in the same era as the original King Kong, the 1930s, but it feels a little bit forced. A lot of the early scenes seem pointless and cheesy. Why do Brody and Watt's characters get off on the wrong foot only for them to kiss moments later? The acting can be very hokey at times, and a lot of the CGI has aged very poorly. The dinosaur chase, anyone? The runtime is a very lengthy 3 hours, and they could have trimmed out a lot of fat. Now, this was released before Andy Serkis was really a household name, but he really delivers as King Kong. The look in his eyes really makes you sympathize with the beast, and the ending seems all the more tragic because of it. He's a hapless victim who meets his untimely demise because of the greed of others. Now, before doing these episodes, I usually watch the films again, and I watched this version for the first time in probably a good 10 years, and I was expecting to rank it really low. After seeing it again, I just couldn't help but put it up closer to the top of the list. Yes, the effects look extremely dated, but overall, it has aged really, really well, and it's still just as much fun as it always was. So, before we get to number 1, we gotta do some honorable mentions. First and foremost, obviously, since we're not including the original film, easily one of the greatest films ever made. Everybody should see it at least once in their lifetime. And you should also check out The Most Dangerous Game. Now, after production ended on King Kong during the day, they would use the same sets at night to film The Most Dangerous Game. And post-production was actually concluded sooner, so it was released a year earlier in 1932. And definitely the biggest honorable mention is the 1949 film, Mighty Joe Young. Despite having no connections to the King Kong story arc, this film is widely considered the third installment in the series due to the involvement of the same creative team, including Marion C. Cooper. This is Ray Harryhausen's feature film debut, where he worked as an assistant to Willis O'Brien. It's an impressive blend of stop motion and live action. The 1933 film can never be matched, but Mighty Joe Young comes close, and it's a masterpiece in its own right. And it was actually released in a 3-pack alongside the two 1933 films. So, I didn't include King Kong or Mighty Joe Young, but had they been included in this list, there's no doubt about it, that would have been number 1 and number 2. But, since they were not included, your official number 1 on today's list, from 1976, the remake of King Kong, starring Jeff Bridges and Jessica Lange. It managed to update the story in a way that the Peter Jackson version failed to do. It overhauls the original without losing its essence. The visuals are dated but effective nonetheless. The runtime is a bit long at 134 minutes, but that's much more manageable than the Peter Jackson version. The acting and dialogue can be a little bit awkward at times, but the overall product is rather impressive. This version has a really nice, slow build with that Beauty and Beast story that goes on. We watch Jessica Lange's character gradually accept Kong's affection. She oftentimes simply stares at him in absolute silence, but you can feel the raw emotion between the two characters, and that lends itself well to make the effects that much more convincing. It's a modern take on an old classic, and in my humble opinion, it's the best of the King Kong sequels. So in conclusion, I'd honestly recommend watching any one of these films. They're all good in their own unique ways. But I'd like to thank you very much for watching The Real Bit Wars. I'm Chris, and have a nice day.
What do they got in there?